Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the very first issue of Howard Chaykin's American Flagg. I've always been a Chaykin skeptic, largely because I don't like the surface finish of his drawings, of his style in general, and the repetitive nature of his faces has always turned me off. But I quite like a lot of his writing. I've been especially enjoying his Hey Kids comic series and a lot of the other like independent stuff he's been putting out over the last few years. But I've never really gone back to American Flagg, and I know it's a big deal, so I wanted to give it a chance. And I was at a Second and Charles a long time ago now. These have been sitting on my shelf for a while. But going to Second and Charles, digging through their like dollar bins, found pretty much a complete run of American Flagg, just missing a few issues here and there. And so I finally started reading that, and issue one really blew me away. The series, I think I'm up to issue 8, has continued to impress me. And when I put it in the timeline of when this came out in 1983, looking at like Frank Miller's Ronin would be coming out about the same time. Dark Knight Returns hadn't come out yet. Watchmen hadn't come out yet. V for Vendetta was on its run. And I would really put this book up there with V for Vendetta and Dark Knight Returns, just as really, really quality comics. I think this is actually significantly better than Dark Knight Returns, and probably, in my estimation, better than V for Vendetta. I don't know, I'd have to go reread it. I'm wondering if just the fact that it was an ongoing series and it's actually, I think, a little bit more intellectual and sophisticated than those other books, as well regarded as they are. I wonder if this one, I know it's well regarded, but not to the extent as those ones. So I wonder if just having those in like a chunk, like here's a little finished chunk, influence the perception of these. I know this is an important series, but it just doesn't seem to that status. But I think I would rate it higher so far, at least in the first 8 issues. But I wanted to really go through issue 1 because as I was reading it, I just saw all kinds of really interesting stuff going on in this book that I wanted to comment on. I won't comment on the rest of it. I'm just going to read it for my own enjoyment, and see where the series goes from there. But there's just all kinds of stuff in here that I think is really great. And the thing that I see in here that really like lands Chaykin's work for me better is how design oriented it is. He's an amazing designer. There's still some stuff with the surface finish that I don't like so much, like the weird kind of speckle texture that he gets, kind of a stippling for some of his values, but it looks like a noise tone. I'm not sure, like, I don't know. The surface is always just a little weird to me, and I still don't really like the way he draws faces. They're all too rectangular. But the idiosyncrasies of his style haven't quite pushed all the way there at this point, and the designs of every page are always so interesting, whereas I feel like his work now is not so design heavy. So I really, really see why this was a big deal at the time. And I just think it's very perceptive, for this to be released in 83. There's a lot that still feels relevant today. It's interesting to see where it's also not relevant. Like the entire thing is pretty much based around this gigantic mall that's become its own city in Chicago. So I like that idea in the 80s that they have that the mall is going to take over, and getting very right all the video and automation stuff, but not seeing that purchasing and shipping would also become automated and kill the mall. So that's always interesting, where they get all of the kind of general thematics of where society is going right, but the mechanisms of it aren't quite, haven't panned out exactly the way they see it. So you have like all kinds of interesting stuff here going on, and this is the kind of stuff where I see this happening before Dark Knight, all the stuff with the TV screens that I think Frank Miller kind of maybe picked up on. But just look at this page. It's an amazing bit of design and composition. I really like all these little screens together. I also really like the zoom in on this mega mall here, and so you get a sense of the scale of it. It's not too huge, but then you zoom in on this screen, and then this screen pops out and becomes its own panel with its own, like, kind of shape to it. And so just that whole flow of that zoom is really interesting. The composition throughout here is really interesting. The really interesting thing he does where he has like text here and then here and then here. I don't know. It's just all really, really nice looking. There's also just structurally the story that's told throughout is really, really interesting. So there's this countdown that starts immediately, go gang, and there's these numbers counting down. So that creates like a cycle within the story where these people are going to attack the mall, and that's something that frames the issue and sets up the narrative for the issue, but it's also a recurring theme in one of the major plots going throughout. So something that I think Chaykin's doing really well in the first 8 issues that I've read is each story feels pretty like open, middle, close within the issue, but then there's all of these other characters cycling and subplots and things. So it has that really good like TV show writing where you can dip in for an episode and it kind of makes sense, but there's much better, bigger things going on. And I really enjoy that. Again, just the design stuff throughout is really interesting. And then I think the writing is really well done as well. Like right here, just some of the banter is really fun. And she's basically saying that she does so little in her job that she could might as well be an obstetrician at a convent. And I just like that passing comment. I might as well be an obstetrician at a convent. I'm so unnecessary. I think that's really great. There's a lot of cool formalisms going on here. Like here, as she's walking out and slams the door, the slam covers up where she's calling her dad asshole, and he's saying just like her mother. But I like that blocking the word balloon. Again, the design element here of like watching her go away, that's really not necessary at all for the storytelling of it. You get that she slammed the door and gone away, but it's visually so cool, and it adds like this rhythm to the page and gives some extra, it's not necessary information, but it really spices up the page visually. I really, really like those kind of elements in what Chaykin's doing. His interest in like signs and fonts and all of those kind of design elements that he is very, very strong with. You can see him always finding reasons to come up with new logos and things like that. I find that very, very compelling. Here is something that I think, I almost missed it. It's an interesting idea, but it's really setting up a huge plot point for what's coming forward in the story, something that's, still playing out by issue 8. Characters are only just figuring out what this character's up to, but where he bumps into the main character, Reuben Flagg. He's a TV star. If people haven't read this, I'm new to this. I'm sure most people have read this, but Reuben Flagg is a former TV star who's now been sent to this megaplex to be security, and he's very much a naturally heroic character and a good policeman. I don't know if at any point in the series they show what type of TV series he was on, but it seems more like a comedy pornographic thing. I don't think he was playing a heroic character. So I like the idea that like kind of the bumbling, sexy hunk is actually the really competent kind of outsider guy in the system who's just looking out for himself while also being a good character. Really interesting character. All of the characters and kind of the politics and the motivations, I think, are really written from an adult mentality and really sophisticated. That's where I say I think this is better than V for Vendetta or Dark Knight Returns. Just maybe suffered from being serialized and not so easily collectible. But right here you have this thing that I almost missed. Some of it I think is just the print quality. Some of it is Chaykin could have outlined it a little bit more with white. But I think he wanted it to be a detail that people might miss, whereas this character gets bumped. You just get a slip down of like the letter that he's looking at here. And this is like a contract to purchase something. So this is a real big plot point. Pretty easy to miss, but it's like a clue that's embedded in there in an interesting graphic way. I think this is one of the things that Chaykin got really right, is that as we move towards a more information society, icons are going to be a much bigger deal. Even like this little email envelope here seems, pretty, I don't know. I wasn't playing with computers in 83, but I can't imagine. I would think most things were like DOS based at that time. So the fact that he's got like these square icons that look exactly like they would be on a phone, I think is really forward thinking. And then you just see here what the TV show was. You get a poster. I guess he is kind of an adventurer. He's a sexist ranger. I don't know what that means, but I guess he is kind of an adventurer character. But it seems more goofy and obviously sexual than the character is. The character is super sexual in real life as well. So maybe he is just really who he's playing. But I get the sense that in this he's somehow more goofy than in real life. But the design of all of this is amazing, and all throughout you get some really good stuff. I don't know about this first issue, but the second issue I made note was colorized by Lynn Varley, so there must have been some interaction with Frank Miller during this time. The Go Gang, that's kind of a framing device often, or a clock for the whole series, which I think is really cool, is a gang of people that watch a certain TV show that we come to find out has been hacked with subliminal messages. And so, like a clock, 45 minutes after that show ends, they attack the mall. And that's basically as soon as Reuben Flagg gets there, he has to go, take off one of these attacks. It's really interesting to see that idea of what like a marauder would look like in the 80s that you're getting from Fist of the North Star, and the way the mutants look in the Dark Knight Returns, and these characters here kind of all have this motorcycle gang, spikes, heavy metal vibe to it. I think not the magazine, but like Judas Priest metal, leather and zippers and shit. It's pretty funny to see that as like a common vision that was around at that time. But again, just look at the lettering and the design elements of these piao piao, meow meow right here. All of that's really awesome. Flagg is still very desirable character throughout, and is sleeping with a different lady in every issue. So that kind of sets up some of Chaykin's later, more risque work. But even like this check card checking in and having a visual confirmation, all of this stuff feels much, much more relevant to these days. There's a lot of other subplots going on, like I said, that I don't really need to get into. But this character here is the mayor. His daughter's important. He has a set of two robots that are called Bert and Ernie, and no one else really gets that, but this woman here is saying it's a private joke. So still connecting it to our world and trying to make it a feasible future based on the reality of 1983. This right here where it's saying Esperanto is spoken here. That was, I don't know if people even know what that is anymore, but at one time during the 80s and 90s, there was like a push to come up with a universal language that was some mix of like Spanish, Chinese, English, something that would be like a worldwide language. So that's fun to see that was still spoken, but it's like still not the dominant language. English is still the dominant language. That's funny. One of the things I've noticed while I was reading it is that sometimes there are really awesome and really well designed kind of flows throughout the lettering here. Like this panel in particular, I think works, or this page works really well, where the characters like flow down and then come up to here and down. But there are often like little where it's easy to kind of miss the jump up to here. And I have noticed on many pages that even though in general he's doing really creative stuff that's like forward thinking with the lettering, a lot of times it fails, and that doesn't work so well. So on this page I'd made a note that I thought it worked pretty well, and then immediately I started noticing some that didn't work very well. There's an idea in here that was really funny as well, is that these attacks are kind of being funded by the television stations because they can pit the Judeo-Christian moralists against the Legion, and they don't want to stop the fighting because they can broadcast it and make a lot of money for it. And I thought that was really interesting idea, that like the people in charge, the capitalists, are going to make money off of the division. I think that's something that's becoming more and more obvious with like Facebook and things like that. And I've always said that, like in the last 10 years or so, I've always said that if I won the lotto, I would just, like a big lottery, I'd rent out a stadium and put a bunch of weapons in there and just get protesters from both extremes of the left and the right who want to fight it out, and just have them sign a contract and let them beat the hell out of each other and kill each other and put it on TV as a pay-per-view. I think that would be cathartic for a lot of those of us in the middle. Like, you're the ones that want to fight. Here you go. So it's funny to see that he's kind of predicting that state where, the extremists are going to be at war and the rest of us are just going to take advantage of that from a commercial standpoint. Here you just get some more of these really awesome, like, this is an object within the world, but it also sets up a bunch of panels and designs. And then here's this very staccato television thing that I feel like Miller was picking up on for Dark Knight Returns. There's also a really interesting bit down here where like everyone's blaming it on like the Nazis, the communists, the bankers, the phone company, the Jews, and then you have a character that just says, hey, and when you're reading it within that, it's like, what the hell? Like, why is that different? And the mafia, and then it's like, hey, you, and he's sitting there watching this on a little device, and this character's actually like in his space and kind of breaking into his consciousness. And then this right here is Flagg as well. So really interesting, like setting up a motif throughout and then subverting the motif to kind of talk about the intellectual interruption of the awareness. His mind is on one thing, and then that kind of gets put in there. That information's getting forced into the mindset that he's in, and then it takes a second for him to break out of it and see reality. Just a lot being said with just a few little formal tricks, and I think that's great. There's a suggestion in here also that actors are getting replaced by AI. They don't need Ruben Flagg on his show anymore because they have a Trumplography, which is like a computer-generated holograph, basically, hologram, and so they don't need him on the show. I think that's something where we're still working our way towards that. Just some really interesting things here as well with the subliminals being put into the show, the way they're rapping with the characters, and just these design elements where he's willing to blow a little bit of space just on a grid, even though it's like the screens. All of that stuff is really, really compelling to me. Just the designs and these motifs of the screens and the grids and things throughout are really beautiful as well. On this page, there's a fun thing that could be done in movies, I guess, as well with sound effects, but it's a pretty comicsy thing. So someone's like talking and they say, or this is just narration, and it says their silent dignity disturbed by the whoop, 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 whoop of high cycle rotor blades. So the fact that the captions drop out and then the sound effects fit into the just paragraph there, I think is a really interesting formal technique. So just stuff all the way through. Here Flagg has figured out how he can disrupt the subliminals. So this is what I'm saying is there's an open and closed story about this Go Gang thing where it seems like he's come up with the solution to them by issue 1 while setting up, a number of other characters. A whole bunch of characters are being introduced here, setting up the major plot of like this mall is going to be sold, so you're kind of like selling out the country itself. All this stuff that's still playing out way later in the series is embedded in this first issue, but you still get an open and close plot. You get the origin story of the character, kind of finally getting his police costume, transitioning from being the TV guy to the actual hero. It's just a lot of stuff packed into 28 pages. Really masterfully done, well written, and then really well designed all the way throughout. And then also here at the end, there's this extra little bit about interspecies romances. Tonight, a man, a woman, and a duck. And so this like also seeing this opening up of sexual boundaries that I think we're still progressing through right now and heading towards. So it's just, I think this is an absolute masterclass of how to write a first issue, an absolute masterclass of design, an absolute masterclass of writing in general, planning, structure, lots of cool formalisms. I don't think the other issues have so many formalisms in them. I haven't noticed, but there's still a lot of fun stuff as the series goes on. But I really, really feel like Chaykin came out with just like all guns a-blazing in this issue. And I see now why this is such an important series. I I feel like I've tried to read this when I was younger, and maybe it was a little too dense for me at the time or too sophisticated, which I think is another reason that maybe it's not held on the same platform as those other two books, as like evergreens that are always in print. I don't know. I've looked to see if these have collections, and it looks like it's been a while since it's collected. I found a graphic novel version of the second major storyline, and it's pretty badly recolored with things overbright. So I feel like this book is due a real good. I don't know how much of the art is sold or whatever, but what resources there are. But this would be a great book to have a really nice restoration project done, all from the original art. Having someone like Jose Villarrubia or someone like that who can really capture the look of how it looked on the newsprint, put back in rather than being so schlocky. Like the color job on here is really, yeah, this is the first two issues are done by Lynn Varley. So Frank Miller's wife at the time, or soon to be wife, I'm not sure, but his colorist. So really great flat colors all the way throughout, but they need to have the desaturation and stuff that you see on newsprint. I think you could get rid of the Ben Day dots and just have solid colors, and you'd have a really, really slick looking book. And I don't know. I don't know where this sits in most people's canon, but for me, and my kind of sense of how well regarded this is, I think it could be even more highly regarded. It really is a masterpiece first issue, and I'm enjoying the rest of the series. And I think this is like kind of, not that I don't read and enjoy Chaykin's work, but it's broadening my mind of why he's so well regarded. Because like I said, there was always surface style things that turned me off. And I think here you're seeing him at his full powers, where all the design stuff is working. And the design stuff works for some of the surface issues that I have with his work in terms of how he draws figures and stuff. When they're embedded in designs like this, they become a design element, and some of the strange, stiffer, more architectural things that he does with his figures, especially in their faces, really work in this context. I think in his more recent work where the pages aren't so designed like this, maybe that's a barrier for me as well. But this is great. This is great stuff. And yeah, I would love to see some kind of, I don't know when the anniversary, 83. Yeah, we got to be on some anniversary right now in 23. There's got to be a real nice anniversary reprint of American Flagg coming up, hopefully, because this book definitely deserves the attention.
Whole new world. 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 For you and
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.